A good Erev Shabbos. Thursday, as you know, is Yom HaShoah. For those who have heard our teacher, Rabbi J.J. Schachter, speak on the topic, you know that this was a holiday which originated in a committee. So, as such, it left virtually no one satisfied. The uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto began on April 19th, which corresponded in the year 1943 to the 14th of Nisan, Erev Pesach. This famous but ultimately futile act of resistance began on the eve of Passover, Zman Cherutenu, the season of our freedom. The ghetto, which had once held nearly 1/3 Jews in the space of a few city blocks, had seen its population dwindle as the transports of Jews to their deaths at Treblinka ran from Tisha B'Av through Yom Kippur of the previous year. So now, half a year later, Erev Pesach, a small band of fighters, maybe a few hundred who remained, mounted a guerrilla attack on the Germans patrolling the ghetto and held out for nearly a month before being almost all captured or killed. A very few, perhaps 100 or so, escaped to take part in the Warsaw Uprising in 1944 and ultimately survived the war, and lived to tell the story. So it would have been fitting, in a sense, to commemorate this valiant act of defiance on the date it began, Pesach or Erev Pesach. Of course, as we know, the date had already been booked 3,000 years prior as the holiday of Passover. The survivors trying to commemorate the heroism of their band of heroes knew that too. Yet they felt that the heroism of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising and the tragedy of the Holocaust overall overshadowed the exodus from Egypt thousands of years before. And having seen what they had seen, witnessed what they had witnessed, could we blame them? So they advocated for Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura u'Mered Ghetto Varsha, the day of remembering the Shoah and the heroism of the ghetto resistance, on Nisan 14th or 15th, Pesach itself. In the early days of the State of Israel, there were, of course, some who felt that the significance of the redemption of the nation from Pharaoh's servitude in biblical times was still the landmark, the touchstone in our history, as catastrophic as the Shoah was for the Jewish people. So the most religious among the members of the new Knesset, struggling to establish a nation and its Jewish identity and commemorate its landmark events, wished to move Yom HaShoah back to the month of Iyar, because Nisan, the month of Pesach, was always a month in which no public eulogies were given and public mourning rituals were curtailed in honor of celebration of freedom, the exodus from Egypt that Pesach commemorates. The conflict was, as it turned out, that 3 years later, the State of Israel was proclaimed on Erev Shabbos, the 5th day of Iyar. So any morning at the beginning of Iyar would come uncomfortably close to Israel's Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut. It would happen later that a Yom HaZikaron, a remembrance of Israel's fallen soldiers, would be established on the day prior to Independence Day. So because of the celebration of Israel's independence, early Iyar was off the table. And since Nisan was not favored by those wishing to preserve the sanctity and joy of the entire month of Pesach, a compromise was struck which left no one happy. Near the end of Nisan, to the irritation of the religious, and not on the actual date of the uprising, to the frustration of those who actually lived through it and wanted it commemorated appropriately on the date that it happened. So in a way, it's a very Israeli holiday. Everyone's annoyed with everyone else. Speaking from America, Rabbi Soloveitchik felt very strongly that we should not add another day of mourning and sadness to the Jewish calendar, even considering the magnitude of the Shoah itself. Rabbi Soloveitchik believed that Tisha B'Av is the day to commemorate Jewish sufferings throughout the ages, as every tragedy in our exile really stems from the destruction of Tisha B'Av. In fact, he reportedly lobbied Menachem Begin at one point to change Yom HaShoah in observance in Israel to Tisha B'Av. It's an interesting fact of history that they had a very cordial relationship, and one with historical depth. Menachem Begin's father, Dov, was a gabbai to Rabbi Soloveitchik's grandfather, the Brisker Rav. Our custom in our community is to try to respect all the views. We advertise and usually participate in the community-wide Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura observance, which in Toronto still honors the survivors who are still living among us. God bless them. 77 years after the liberation. We also commemorate the Holocaust on Tisha B'Av. We use a collection of kinos that contains 2 kinos, these elegiac poems memorializing the Shoah, among many other heartrending tragedies of Jewish history. One written by Reb Shlomo Halberstam, the Baba of a Rebbe, who witnessed unspeakable horrors before his eyes and yet managed to survive and to rebuild his community after the war. And another one written by Rabbi Shimon Schwab, who was a Rav in several communities in Germany before fleeing to America, where he eventually succeeded Rabbi Breuer as a Rav of the German Kehillah in Upper Manhattan. Both authors use evocative language that alludes to the collection of kinos that preceded them to center the 20th century's worst churban amidst the mourning for earlier losses in our people's history. This year, as Yom HaShoah comes in the week of the portion of Acharei Mos, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on the message of the Parsha of the week, especially coming as it does on the heels of its own tragedy. I'm not old enough to have memories of the Holocaust or its effects, though I met many people and had teachers who experienced it firsthand. I can't begin to imagine what it would have been like, any more than I can imagine what, no one should know from such things, what Aaron HaKohen felt when he lost 2 of his sons on what should have been the greatest day of their professional lives, the dedication of the Mishkan, which in one form or another would be the center of Jewish worship for 1,000 years, and continues to this day to be our model for divine service. On the grand opening day, 2 of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, died suddenly, as we learned about in Parsha Shmini, which we read just a few weeks before Pesach. Now, our portion this week opens saying God spoke to Moses after the death of the 2 sons of Aharon as they came close to God and died. Vayihi Acharei Mos Shnei b'nei Aharon b'kar vasam lifnei Hashem v'yamusu. You'll remember when we read Shmini just a few weeks before Pesach, and the tragedy occurred, Aaron's response was silence. Vayidom Aharon. He was speechless. There was nothing left to say, no words to encompass the vastness of his grief and his loss. Now in Acharei Mos, the story picks up again, and there's work to do. Acharei Mos is perhaps the most listened to portion in the entire Torah, because we read it on Yom Kippur morning, which probably has the greatest synagogue attendance of any day in the calendar. And what's the message here? Coming out of tragedy, out of loss, out of death, heartbreak, do we carry the grudge? Do we nurse the pain? Do we seek revenge? Do we pursue vengeance? Do we feel entitled to pay forward on the violence, the death, the destruction? If you answered no to all of the above, you answered correctly in the Jewish context. The themes of Yom Kippur are those articulated in Parshas Acharei Mos: seek forgiveness, seek atonement, seek morality. Having endured suffering and loss, and witnessed death and destruction of what we love and care for, never entitles us to become bitter and vengeful, whether on the colossal global scale of a Holocaust, or a destruction of a temple and conquest of Israel in Roman times, or on the immediate and personal scale of Aaron and his wife Elisheva's loss of their children. Our grief is allowed to sink in at first, even in silence, if that's what it takes. In fact, when we go to comfort a mourner, we leave it at silence if that's what they want. It's their move to begin a conversation, and then only if they wish. The Jewish project is to try to make something good come of whatever comes our way. If we're blessed with wealth and success, it's not complete until we share it. We give tzedakah, we help others help themselves, we share the wealth quite literally. If things that don't appear to be so good happen to us, we nonetheless do our best to channel our energies into making something good come as a result. Around the world, on every continent, Holocaust survivors emigrated, married, raised families, started businesses, built and joined synagogues, and worked to make the world a better place. Even as they remembered and commemorated what was lost in many different ways, Jews who survived that dark period in human history, that kingdom of night, for the most part, looked forward. The establishment and development of the State of Israel is part of that effort, combined with the desire never again to be at the mercy of any foreign government's kindness, but rather to drive their own destiny. Those survivors who joined the small Jewish settlement in Palestine and with UN sanction and the withdrawal of the British mandate declared an independent Jewish state has from its founding moment dedicated itself to cooperation, to mutual benefit and growth and well-being of all its citizens, Jews and non-Jews, committed from its outset, from its founding document, to peace. Israel was set upon by its enemies, but as the decades rolled along, even some of those, so far, have come to sign peace treaties with Israel. That process continues, and Israel's commitment to the rule of law, justice, humanitarianism, and cooperation within its borders and internationally continues and expands its reach around the globe. The challenges are many, and we have the encouragement of our sages who teach us, Lo alecha hamalacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin lihibatel mimena. It's not your task to complete the work, but neither are you free to recuse yourself from it. Although the situation all around us seems to be stuck, or even, God forbid, sliding backwards, with war, uncertainty, economic instability, and the increasing voice of nationalism and xenophobia in government, we cannot, we do not, and we will not lose our way. However you decide to observe Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, let it be a day of strengthening our resolve to use all our experiences for the good, and let whatever happens to our people or has happened in the past to become a catalyst for good things. If you choose today to study some Torah, let it be in memory of the 6 million. If you choose to give tzedakah today to any number of worthy causes that are in our city or around the world, let it be in memory and honor of the martyrs of the Jewish people. If you choose to daven, maybe at greater length than usual, or say an extra chapter of Psalms for the Kedoshim, let the goodness we know is within our power to accomplish soon overwhelm the negative. And let the era of only good things that we spoke about last Shabbos, with the Haftorah of Achron Shal Pesach, the 8th day of Passover, finally come to be. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, they will neither injure nor destroy in all of my sacred precincts. Lo yareu v'lo yashchisu b'chol har kodshi. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God as water covers the ocean floor. Ki mala ha'aretz deya es Hashem kamayim liyam machasim. May we see it speedily in our days. Good Shabbos and good Yom Tov. If you are in Shul with us this Shabbos, we'll be blessing the new month of Iyar, which begins Saturday night through Monday night, the reappearance of the moon in Jerusalem, the eternal and undivided capital of Israel, will take place Sunday morning at 5:20 a.m. and 1 part. The Moiled wird sein Sonntag in der Früh, 20 Minuten mit ein Chelik noch 5 Azeger.